Welcome, Augsburg members and guests, to week 2 of Sharing Our Faith Stories. This week, Jacob Wharton joins us to tell of God's ongoing work in his life. Thank you for listening, and may you be inspired this Lenten season to consider how God is working in your own life.
Hi, my name is Jacob Wharton, and I was asked to give my faith story. And that's a little bit of a daunting request. But as I thought about it, I felt like I just needed to pray about it and let God direct me to saying what my story is. Supposedly, good stories have a beginning, middle, and end. And I'm going to spoil this one by saying I don't have an end for it yet. But at the beginning of the story, as I would tell my faith journey or story, is growing up in the Methodist church in a suburban area. And I think there was some rumor about there being shouting Methodists at one point in time, but these were no shouting Methodists. There weren't too many hallelujahs from the pews. It was a more conservative, buttoned up type church. But what it did as I was growing up is at least provide me exposure to what I've come to know now as sort of the tenets of our Christian faith. And I would say that along the way, one major milestone would have been going to a summer camp when I was around 13 or 14. And the counselors there made it a point that we all accept Jesus Christ as our personal Lord and Savior. And to be honest with you, thinking back about it, and even at that time then, it felt like we were sort of reading a script. I knew kind of why we were doing it, but it also felt a little hollow. And that time has stuck with me. But as I then, went on to high school and college and started, going to church, uh, especially after college and finding a church in St. Louis where my wife and I met and got married, we became more and more involved. And as I think about my faith story, it's not so much my story, it's about a story that God is telling through us as a community and how God brought me to various churches and the people at those churches. So, just briefly, we moved from St. Louis to Winston-Salem and we're looking for a new church home. We've lived in the West End here for quite a long time. And I have what my wife calls a silly rule that we need to walk to church on Sundays. So that obviously limits the available choices. And we've tried out several, and we're actually members of St. Paul's for a while. And we were still looking for a new home. We were still looking for a place that we felt comfortable and wanting to get more involved. And it was actually J.K. Curry and Dan Bradley who invited us to visit Augsburg, and we did, and immediately felt comfortable there and became involved. But throughout that whole arc, throughout that whole story, there's a couple steps that occurred, and there's the general exposure that we have to Christianity. There's a step that you take where you're accepting Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior. And then there's what I would call or think of as sort of the growing into it phase. And that's where I think my story really begins to make a lot of difference to me. Because as I've gone through my life, become a husband, a father, a member of the community, and a member of a church, all of that is an outward act, an outward experience. But underlying that is, why do we do these things? What motivates us to undertake an act of kindness, an act of charity? And I find that for me, there was no necessary, notwithstanding the summer camp experience, there was no Billy Graham revival point where I decided I'm a Christian now. Instead, it's been a growth, a slow growth, but a growth where I've found direction. I've found a place where I can turn to when there's difficulties. But moreover, I've found that it provides the guide rails of sorts for life. And when I'm looking for a answer to a question, I can at least turn to my faith. I can turn to the church, and by the church I mean the people. And maybe I get an answer, maybe I don't get an answer, but what I get at least are the guide rails that help me go in the right direction. And so I think all of us, as we go through life and bounce off of one rail or the other, that faith journey is where we ask God to lead us. And that has developed into something we do every night as a family at the dinner table. And it makes our lives richer and provides us with a little bit more meaning in what we do and how we help our community. Um, so my story, like I said, doesn't have an end. So I think of it as still being in the middle. But what I do hope is that I continue to grow. And as a father and as a community member, I provide some of those guide rails for others in the future.